Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen. Whoa, whoops, I accidentally had the audio feed looping. Hey, what's up everyone? This is February 1st, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily number 60, and I am in a fantastic mood because I just had my mind blown by seriously the most unbelievably amazing kick-ass thing I've seen in my entire life. I couldn't believe how fucking outrageously sweet it was, and I can't tell you about it because of NDA. And I know you guys are thinking that you know what I'm thinking I'm talking about, but it's not that. It's not what you think. It's something completely different. I'll reveal it far in the future when I'm allowed to, but I just want to say I'm in a fantastic mood. Oh my god, I feel wonderful. Ooh, oh man, I got the gitchy. But yeah, today we're doing something a little bit special. For those of you who are unaware, we are doing the replay analyses that were submitted by people who watched this stream. Something kind of funky happened though, because so this was the prompt that I gave in the last few Day 9 dailies. And by the way, if this is the first time you're hearing this, do not submit me any additional replays. I've already selected the ones, so that way I don't want to get some floods like 3 weeks after the fact, like, please take my replay, and I have to say, a month late, you know. Anyways, so this was the idea. You send me a game that you played, say the matchup, if you can, specify what the ranks of the players are, and then give me 3 to 4 sentences as to why I should pick your game. And, and obviously a link to the replay. And I assumed that most players would send me something, like, hey Day, here's me, I'm D+, playing against another player, just a random guy. I'm trying out this new build, but I just can't seem to get it to work, It seems like every time I do it, I lose to this push. How do I fix that? I was assuming it would be something like that. But amazingly, 90% of people did not do that. So many people did it to the point where it actually made me kind of realize, I think I'm seeing a general theme of some of the issues that are happening in play. So let me just briefly write in chat that we are doing replay submission analysis today. So that way people who tune in late can figure out what I'm talking about. But anyways, so this is the thing that most people did. They would send me a link to a replay, and they would say, hey Day, this is me against a Protoss player. I'm Terran in this game. I go for a 1-factory early expand, and I do a mid-game push, and he holds it off, and then he gets Arbiters, and he kills me with that. Hope you choose my replay. Thanks. And that doesn't say anything. You gave me a description of the game, and then I kept going through, and so many people just told me what happened. No one actually gave ideas of what they were worried about, things they wanted to work on, and I wasn't really looking for anything necessarily elaborate, as we'll see from the replay submissions that I ended up selecting. But it was amazing to see how few people actually wrote down what issues in the gameplay were. And I mean, granted, I perhaps maybe was not clear enough, about that. I just said, tell me why you should choose it, and people just sort of wrote, it's a very standard game, that's why you should choose it. But, considering this is a show about learning StarCraft and being able to be the supreme nerd that snaps as many necks on IC Cup as possible, and even WCG if you're into the live stuff, I want to make sure that the focus stays on how do I improve my own play. So, for many of you who did submit replays, who maybe did that, that's the reason I wanted the 3 to 4 sentence description, is not only because, I have a bazillion of these to read through and I need something small, but also because it's important to be able to sum up the action of the game and what went wrong, so that way you know how to improve in the future. So obvious things, so what I'm doing right now is, instead of doing 5 replays, I'm going to do 4, and I'm going to spend just 4 or 5 minutes right now describing general things of what I'm talking about, so that way everyone has a better sense of how to improve themselves in games. So for instance, let's say I just play an ordinary old game. There's the things that I'm going to think about that are very normal, like, am I macroing well? Am I controlling my units well? And, if my macro's off, I'll naturally say, I need to macro better in the future, and maybe I'll use this new hotkey setup, or maybe I'll just look at the keyboard more to force myself to macro, or maybe I'll put post-its around my monitor to help myself macro. But let's now go back to the strategy side of the game. So, inhaling tea leaves. So if we think about the strategy, what would be nice is to say something like, what are my goals? Did I accomplish my goals? Did I ever feel like I didn't have a plan? These are all sorts of things that once you articulate, you suddenly have something you're trying to solve. And that's what all the replays I selected, all the people who submitted totally did that. For instance, the first replay we're going to look at is a Zerg vs. Terran by Plume. He says, I transitioned to Hydra Lurk in the mid-game. And how do you macro with an army that's this big? I have a really difficult time having enough hotkeys to control a big army and to macro really well at the same time. So, we'll have an opportunity to look at that and discuss that. And he also says, I'm having trouble dealing with this really big, aggressive build in the mid-game, and I barely survive at this game. How do I catch it in the future? So now I have two clear things that I'm going to be discussing in that game. And, if there wasn't a Day 9 daily around, if Plume was just in his room by himself, he would be able to think, how can I find ways to, discover this aggressive build early on? How can I macro properly? How can I control my stuff properly? There's directions that he wants to be going in. So if any of you, submitted and maybe just did one of those summaries, think if you do that with your games a lot of the time, where you sit down and don't really ask yourself, what was my plan? Because again, just doing that helps give yourself a lot of directions. So let's go ahead and jump right in to the first replay here in the Rep 3 folder. So this is a game on Moonglaive that we're going to be watching today. I may have the Storm plugin enabled. I'm not entirely sure. We'll find out in a moment. Either way, it's probably good if we leave it off, just so we have a good sense of, focusing on the game at hand instead of being like, oh, well, considering there's 4 minutes left in this game, and trying to make some wild analysis based on that. So this is going to be Plume up at the top, and I'm actually going to take Vision off this Terran, Expert of Nothing. So, we have a very normal scout path. I like this scout path because we're going towards this little arena right here, this little spot to hop on top of. That's exactly where we want to be going. Good Overlord scout patterns. And we have the drone being sent out early. I think this is a reasonable map to do it on. Cheesing's pretty strong on this map. Positions are, pretty easy to scout out because it's 3 starting positions instead of the usual more 4 or something like that. So I'm actually going to rearrange my keyboard real fast here because it is not at an optimal position. And expanding. And going for the third hatch on 14, totally fine. This is a very normal build. I would prefer this a little bit farther down, just because with one scan, it's harder to really see everything if this is in a slightly different spot. So, we have some little antics going on here. Would have liked a little bit smoother of a transfer there, but these are, not the things that Plume wanted to focus on. Because, again, these are the sorts of things that you should be able to watch your games and be like, yeah, man, I had way too many drones doing stuff that I didn't want to do. So when Plume actually sent me this, normally I watch these replays cold, but Plume said, I'm having trouble against the Ayumi build. And by the way, this is superb, just drawing a little extra guy out, killing him off. Notice 2 Lings coming here very quickly. That's also excellent. But Plume was asking about an Ayumi build, and I didn't really know what that meant. So I just briefly watched the start of the game, and this almost certainly is what is being discussed. Look at this. 4 barracks. We're cutting SCVs at both command centers. Well, this one isn't building anything, so he's definitely not going to be building SCVs there. But no gas yet, just saving stuff up, and we're going to see not that many SCVs built this game. And this is an unbelievably weird build. It's going to throw off a lot of timings. This is a good extractor timing. Layers coming out nice and fast. Yeah. Good look for about everything. And really, you should have this down pat every game. If you're Zerg, you should have these sorts of timings very clean. Notice all these larvae are being produced out of. That is fantastic. And what's so weird about this is you just get so much stuff, and you can be outrageously aggressive early on. And yet, look, no SCVs being made at either of these locations. You're kind of broke. And what's totally awesome is we're going to see that this guy messes up his academy. That's one thing that you really want to be careful of, is building too much stuff around your refinery. Yeah, look at that little retarded SCV. Poor guy. So yeah, still not that many SCVs being mined. I really recommend bouncing in and out of here with your Lings a lot. Because really, making a big line like that is not going to be that useful. Big lines like this are very useful, if you're trying to stop a probe from popping out or trying to stop anything from scouting. But with speed, you don't really need to do that. And against Marines, it's very easy to lose your Zerglings that way. they try to dart in, and then you kind of have issues. So this is one thing I'm noticing right now. Look at the money right here. This is sort of like retroactive planning. So what happens is, notice right now, all these Mutalisks just got made. Look, perfect timing. We have Mutalisks being able to be made everywhere. We actually have a fourth larva that's about to pop up here. But what happens at this stage in the game is you say, I have 300 extra minerals. You should never say, what can I do now with this 300 minerals? You instead say, what could I have done way earlier so that I have 0 minerals now? In other words, the expansion is very late. There should be an expansion up a lot earlier right now. And this is what's really obnoxious about this build. Look how many Marines this is. This is kind of an all-in style play, to be frank. And look at this. He's building another academy, so that way he doesn't, manner himself on the geyser. LOL, oh LOL. I really think that the Terran player should have advanced out a lot sooner. I think he could have been a lot more threatening. But at this stage, Zerg should be completely 100% aware of what the Terran player is doing. Really, there's a few timings you should think about. So notice right now, these Mutalisks are already getting ready to push out. If the opponent was going for 2 racks early push-outs, some sort of just minor, gentle mid-game control and then maybe coming back, these Marines would have been active a lot earlier. So what I would suggest, for the question, how do I deal with these sorts of early aggressive builds? The answer is to look at a normal game and then look for when he pushes out. Look at about 7 minutes. We're seeing these players push out when they do this sort of insane, ultra-fast 4 barracks. And our, academy's not really helping here. Nothing wrong with panicking and adding on a bunch of sunken colonies here. Now, a real question is, why are we getting our 5th hatchery right now? Are we really in that dire need of a bunch of units in the mid-game? I'm not so sure. I'd actually probably prefer a +1 carapace beforehand. This to me seems like a little bit symptomatic of discomfort with this. Maybe not the best planning. Also, we're hitting the opponent right here. Is that really where we want to be hitting him? Probably want to wait till he's all the way back here. We want to use our Mutalisks to pick off the edges of this for as much as possible until he really gets close and we can pick him off with a bunch of Zergling Muta. There's nothing wrong with seeing this and going, oh crap, he's really trying to kill me early on, and making a bunch of Mutalisks and Zerglings. If you are going to choose to do that, you should try to hit him back here. Have a control group of Zerglings here, 1 here, and then having 2 here. And then trying to get a good surround right when the Terran player gets there. And then, of course, having Mutalisks fly on in. I'm going to go ahead and speed things up because we do have 3 more replays to go. So that's probably the big thing I would focus on, is getting that good early game timing. Pretty good macro, still making drones here. That demonstrates to me a lot of comfort. If I was watching any other game, I would say, oh, look, the Zerg is totally confident that he can defend this because he made drones to replenish here. I'm worried, though, because Plume, wrote in his questions, how do I know if this build is coming? And I really only held this off because of luck. I mean, even note that this expansion really hasn't had anything made out of it, just, for pure fear. If the Terran did scout that out, he probably would have been able to just kill it off relatively easily. So, this is the part where I really feel like Zerg's getting incredibly lucky because Terran waited until Zerg got lurkers. And really, that probably shouldn't happen. And look at the macro slipping for Zerg. This is very typical to happen when you're in an intense situation that you're, not used to, that you're uncomfortable with. Always get thrown off your rocker, sort of forget your fundamentals. But very important that in those intense situations, the first thing you think about is, am I macroing properly? Am I doing my basic stuff properly? Don't even worry about, what's right in front of your face. So this might be the transition into the more normal Hydralisk Lurker. One issue I have with taking this as a 3rd expansion, I actually have 2 issues. One is that, if your opponent attacks this and kills it off, you're really vulnerable because he's just able to walk right over here and kill this off, Theoretically, if you weren't able to defend this, you're not going to be able to defend that. More importantly, if we end up taking this spot over here, this main, it makes our 4th gas a lot easier to take. When we expand over here, our 4th gas is a little bit more difficult to take. But probably not so much because we still have this space right here, right on this left side of the mini-map. Terran's going to be doing everything pretty standardly from here on out. He's sort of starting to falter a little bit near the end of the game right now. He's doing a pretty good job of keeping his money low. So, I mean, even though he's doing this funky build, he has a decent amount of SCVs, and his money is pretty close to zero. I think that if you can win this game in Zerg spot, you should give yourself a big pat on the back. You should say, I am adequately dealing with a Terran who can keep his money down. Because that's probably the big issue that most Terran players at low levels deal with, is that they can't really macro around the time that they start getting the, the starport. Yeah, this sort of stuff. This money's getting real high. We're going to start to see a lot of stuff get queued. Yeah, a lot of stuff gets missed. That's when the money starts to really soar as Terran, and we stop seeing accurate results. And we see a little run around with the Mutalist. I'm not so sure I like this. And this attack, I'm going to come back and talk about this attack in just a second. Yeah, look at this. Macro starting to falter a little bit. This is definitely the point in time where players start to not have the best mechanics. And that's okay. I would call that normal. In your path from a low D plus level player all the way up to the B levels, what should happen is around D plus C minus. If you can get there pretty solidly, what it means is you have a really good build that you have solid up to the mid game. Like we saw Plume here had a really solid play, was just keeping his money very low, timing everything nicely, not forgetting his overlords. And then once he hits an unorthodox situation and the game starts to become a little bit more freeform, that's when we kind of start to get that little bit of shakiness. And again, that's very, very normal, and it's good to just be aware of that. So right now, I mean, we're seeing all these larvae here. That's something to be aware of. So if I were Plume in my shoes, oops, I forgot that there's this battle going on down here that I said I would pause and talk about in a little bit. If I'm Plume, the big thing I'm saying is, there was a point in this game where I had this much money. Why is that? And I think the answer is, after that big mid-game attack, once I start getting Hive, I might not have the best comfort with what I'm doing, and then my money gets way too high. Therefore, I'm going to really focus on just macroing in the later stages of the game. So we're seeing a transition into Hydra Lurker. What I would prefer is to get the Hive a lot earlier. Remember how I was saying, we're getting that 5th hatch really early. Why are we getting that 5th hatch really early? I would prefer to get an earlier Queen's Nest, an earlier Evolution Chamber, and then the 5th hatch when we're en route to the Hive. And then to be doing a lot of stuff with Defiler, Lurker, Ling, and transitioning to the Hydralisks after that. That's the best way to transition to Hydra Lurk for the late game. If you want to do a bunch of Hydra Lurk before the Hive, make sure you're really focusing on a huge, gigantic Hydra Lurker army, and then you're getting Hive. This is sort of like getting the Hive and the Hydra's upgrades at the same time. Keep unpausing, forgetting about this. Yeah, and I don't like this timing where you're kind of getting both. Really, if you can get both, it generally means that something went wrong with your macro earlier, so you had money to do both, and you really shouldn't have had the money to do that. So this push down here, we had a bunch of lurkers up here, and a tank sieged here, and what I think would have been brilliant is just to move the lurkers just around this region right here, so it's right in range of the tank. Just kill the tank off and then hang right here. We instead had a bunch of Zerg units trying to come here. You don't need to kill the Terran push right outside his front door. I mean, there's absolutely no need to do that. Just, stick to your high ground. Make him do stuff like this. Look, this is fantastic. We want more stuff like this. And then what we really want to do is be getting Defilers at some point, which hopefully should be somewhere. Yeah, the instant your Hive finishes, you want the Defiler Mound coming out like the millisecond after that comes out. The nanosecond, the picosecond after that, Hive pops out. We want to get the Defilers. And the Defilers are really what you want to rely on, for your late game magic. And that's actually probably a useful thing to state, that let your Defilers and later win you the game. Don't try to win the game here. If you have an opportunity to clamp his whole army to kill it off, don't take it. Actually force yourself to use Defiler and post-Defiler tech to win the game, because then you'll have a lot of experience with that. So, that was what I would say a lot about some of the early game flaws I'm seeing right here. So a question is, how do you macro with all this stuff? Well, I would use 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 for these hatcheries. So that's going to take care of these 5 with 5 to 9, and then you can have 0 as this one. And then what becomes useful is to have an unhotkeyed hatchery be next to a hotkeyed hatchery, or be somewhere you can just zip to really fast. And then use 1, 2, 3, 4 as units. So, you know, we might have our lurkers, you know, let's say over here is 1, and then we might have 2, 3, and 4 right here. And then what you should do is you should have some units here in little groups of 12, like this. And then if you see the Terran moving here, and you want to hit it with a big army, you start boxing these units and hitting attack on the mini-map, and boxing and then attack, and box and then attack, and then box and then attack, and then go 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and all the units that were hotkeyed will move in one giant wave. Meanwhile, you're going 5, you know, SZ, 6 SZ, 7 SZ, 8 SF, 9 SH, 0 SH, and you're getting a big, gigantic army. At this stage, I really feel like Plume has won the game. He held off that first big push, and you know, here's a little bit of disorganization here. How do we fix this? Well, look at this. You know, our lurkers aren't really in the best place relative to our other units. They're kind of getting caught up. I would prefer then maybe my Hydralisks lining up right here and my lurkers like this. So that way, when the lurkers come here, there's a big scoop of units right here. And everything else that I wasn't hotkeyed, you know, because they were in groups up here, fall in behind the lurkers. And that's all pre-battle planning. It doesn't really require my hotkeys so much. I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 there for convenience, for a little bit of extra micro where I need it, but the rest of it is pretty adequately handled just by pre-battle positioning. And then here, you know, we're starting to see the macro get a little bit shaky, get a little bit, and, you know, no big deal. We're going ahead and transitioning to Ultralisks, and not much to be said here. Zerg is very clearly in an overwhelmingly advantageous position after denying that push right here and killing off that huge army of a badrillion medic marines at the front. Just an absolute godzillion amount of them. And, you know, I actually like this a lot. We saw Plume's money get really high, and he just said, well, fuck it, whatever, I'll just expand twice. Absolutely correct. Anytime your money's getting way too high, for God's sake, just spend it. Even if it feels a little bit weird, and like, you know, you weren't timing this perfectly, I mean, just do it. And then we're going to see Plume's money stay really, really low. And look, just waltzing right in for the easy victory. So I like that game quite a bit, first of all, because Plume asked good questions, and we got the chance to answer them. But also because it just demonstrates a lot about how just a few little minor adjustments can make a big, 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 big difference. You know, just positioning with the army and that sort of thing. And again, to come back to how do I deal with that early build that I seem to have, you know, had luck on my side in order to hold off? What I would say is be a little bit more aggressive with your lings early on, poking in, and watch as many games of yourself playing dull, normal games. And just say, oh, my Terran opponent, who did the most normal, dull-ass thing in the world, moved out at exactly this time. And then, what was my food at? Okay, when I was at 59 food, my Terran opponent, or actually it comes out earlier, you know, right when I was at 35 food, my Terran opponent moved out when he went for 2 racks. Oh, great. Then if I'm playing another game and I'm at 35 food and my opponent isn't moving out, I start to go, is he up to something weird? You know, and then I might build a creep colony, not morph to a sunken colony, but just build the creep colony. And then, you know, when you're watching some other of your boring replays, you say, and then when I'm at 40 food, my opponent moves out if he went 3 racks. So now we know that 35 or, you know, 32 food is when he moves out with a 2 racks, 42 foods when he moves out with the 3 racks. And then all of a sudden, if we're at like 53 food, if our mutals are almost done and we still haven't seen anything, we start to go, is he going for something big, you know? Maybe build an extra creep colony for defense. These are the sorts of things that we want to think about. We want to establish triggers for us to do more stuff based upon what we don't see. And also, I realize right now that I have not had sound on, so what I'm going to do is actually crank it up. Yeah. Yeah, listen to that. We're going to hear some SCVs mining. Ooh, yeah. This next game is from Kill Order. I believe that sounds right. Yeah, it's from Kill Order. And Kill Order says, had just fantastic questions, said that in, you know, he's not a high-level player, he said. And a big issue he has is that there are so many options early game, you know, with shuttles and reavers and DTs and all this, that he feels really uncomfortable early on. You know, the Protoss really feels like he can do anything early on, so he feels motivated to defend like a whole bunch. And then all of a sudden, the Protoss army has tons of mobility and can add on so many gateways. So, you know, That's some nice, friendly little talking, He's worried that the Protoss can add on so many gateways that there's too much mobility. So then, he also has to turtle up and defend. And then he just feels continuously uncomfortable with when to attack. There just feels like there's so many possibilities that his opponent can do that it's too difficult to account for all of them. And the other big thing is that, especially on Python, he's having trouble defending more than 2 bases. So everything's going normally. Nothing too noteworthy, so we're going to go ahead and speed it up. But let's keep those in mind. How do we deal with all the possibilities of Protoss? And let's actually just take our vision off Protoss for a little bit. And look at this. Oh, almost taken out the probe. I really don't recommend running around with an SCV to kill this stuff off. This Marine's going to be able to just eliminate them pretty easily. And, getting the money's pretty important. So first thing I'm noticing, very late factory. Want to be coordinating that, so right when you get to 100 gas, you're building your factory. So just a little thing like that. We pulled guys out of gas, so almost certainly an early expand coming up. So just sort of poking around. This SCV's, having a little bit of trouble continuing to scout. Building a supply depot. I like this placement. It helps block Reaver shots. You can also put another supply depot there to really block Reaver shots. And getting the add-on, probably going to be expanding in just a moment here. A little bit of sloppiness. Okay, so notice that we just had our scouting SCV killed off. And this is what we saw, 2 Dragoons. So at this point, I'm pretty confident he's going for either fast range, he's probably going for a Robo Bay, maybe getting observers really quickly. Probably not something like, ultra-fast Reavers or ultra-fast DTs. You normally don't see 2 Dragoons that quickly. So already we're starting to trim down on our possibility set. And you see, notice right here already the Terran player is almost at 1,000 food off 1 base. And, I'm sincerely hoping that this replay is not bugged. That actually has happened before, and that's, always kind of funny if I'm analyzing a game. And the player's getting up to 6k minerals, and I'm like, yeah, definitely spend your 6k. You don't want to have 6k by any means. And so right now we're seeing this player is going for a Templar drop. So already I can tell you right now, the reason that Kill Order is feeling really uncomfortable with the amount of possibilities that his opponent has is because the mechanics of his own build are not very smooth. This is what happens. If you can get your build down pat every single time, like let's say you play like an absolute robot and you build your command center at an identical time every single game, and you get your engineering bay down at an identical time every single game, and you're doing this sort of 1 factory early expand. What happens is you can start timing what your opponent does based on what you do. We were kind of talking about this before with Plume's game. For instance, let's say right when I build my command center, I know my opponent can only have X number of Dragoons possible. Or I know that my opponent can only be so far along with his robotics facility. So that way I know when I'm going to be worrying about stuff. A lot of times, if you're studying your own play enough relative to your opponent's play, you just know when any possible attack can happen. So you're just comfortably making tons of drones. I mean, in my case, because I'm Zerg, I'm making tons of drones. I'm not even really scouting them. And then all of a sudden, I go, okay, now's the time I need to send a Zergling and see if an attack's coming. And if I wander up and there's no attack there, I'm going, okay, great. I know that if he's playing well, he's going to come out with an attack right then and there. And if he doesn't, he's almost certainly not doing it. And if he's doing it, and he's coming out late, then he's doing a poor build anyways, and I'll be able to defend with that right now. So right here, we're seeing this very late command center. We're seeing money rack up. Really probably need to be adding on an engineering bay about now. And if you can get this smoothed out, all of a sudden, you see how limited your opponent is with all his possibilities. It feels like he won't really have any threats that you can't deal with. Because this Dark Templar harass, it's kind of normal. But again, this is very, very sloppy by the opponent. What happens if you have a good build is you'll already have the engineering bay up. You'll already have turrets around. You'll be adequately prepared for a Reaver drop or a Dark Templar drop. And then about now is when the Reaver drop or Dark Templar drop should happen. So you go, okay, great. He's not doing it. I'm prepared. And then if you do see it happen like this, you go, oh, well, pff, yeah, nice Dark Templar drop. I had turrets up a million years ago, and I already have enough units to hold it off. That's what I'm talking about, having a very smooth build. Normally, you'll have these turrets out just in time, but if your build's smooth enough, normally you'll have these turrets out just in time with a smooth enough build, but if you get a little bit delayed like this, it can be really mentally boggling. You just get super duper uncomfortable. Oh, that's an armory and an academy. Never mind. I thought that was a 2 armory build. I was like, I don't like doing that, especially if you haven't taken your second gas yet, and there's a second gas. Also, this command center is up 1 square, it can be down 1, little things like that. Also, I'm noticing way too many turrets being built. Normally, you can get away with just 4 turrets, 3 if you're really comfortable. You build 1 here, and then you build another one around here, sort of defending your cliff, and also these guys, maybe 1 here, maybe even as far south as this, maybe 1 right there. And then another one right here. And then you have a nice little ring here, and you can build a whole bunch of factories tucked away in this nest right there. And, if you're really uncomfortable with 3, then just get 4. But, look, here's 3 of them right here. We managed to kill the Dark Templar harass, but, we have 2 up here. And these, this factory is just barely covered. There's this weird range of non-coverage right here. You don't really want that. And look, getting caught up on supply. And notice that I'm not even really looking at what the opponent's doing, right? I'm not even concerned about Protoss at this point. Really, from the Terran's point of view, I'm noticing a little bit of lack of consistency here. And anytime your build is kind of bumpy, if you're getting more money in spots that you should, or excuse me, if you're getting more money in spots and you should not be getting that extra money, you start to just spend it in a way that doesn't quite make logical sense. Like if I said to you, I'm going for a really fast upgrade build with a fast early expand, and then I'm going to go for a 5 factory push ultra quickly. You'd go, well, how do you have the money to do that? If you're macroing extremely, extremely well, you won't really have the money to get this armory and do this ultra-fast 5 factory push. Actually, it looks like you can even afford a 6th factory, and you can expand. You start to see what the possibilities of your own build are when it's really smoothed out, and then you can start exploiting super good timing windows, where basically, let's say your decision is, to skip over this armory and instead to just do this 5 factory push. You'll realize that against 90% of ways that your Protoss opponent plays, including if he does sloppy builds or misses his timing, 90% of the time you'll just kill him with this 2 factory or with this 5 factory push. You don't really need to worry about the other possibilities because he's just dead in all those other possibilities, and that's what a smoothed out build does. It means you're up against dead or a very, very narrow range of possibilities that you can start to really think about. Yeah, and look at this, we can afford a starport already. We're getting ready to get our next big upgrades. So that is how I would answer the first big question Kill Order had. Just really, really, really smooth this build out. Super, super clean. Never missing a depot. Never missing an SCV. Just getting all that money really spent down to 0, and you'll be blown away at how easy suddenly and clear and predictable your opponent's stuff will feel. And now the other question is, how do we defend more than 2 bases? On Python, you need to have a really strong push in order to defend this. If you just look at the map, everyone just take a look at this mini-map. This is a huge, wide open center. There's no nice little cliffs that you can use to defend anything, with the exception of maybe the natural where you put a tank here to shoot over. But look, there's this obnoxious sort of weird anti-rubble there where you can't place any tanks. So, a big push is really how you're going to defend this. Start getting comfortable with big pushes. Again, if your builds aren't very smooth, what happens is you start pushing out at this time, which is a little late, and you already have a weak army because your build hasn't quite gone the way you want it. And consequently, in your experiences with pushing, you don't win nearly that much. Oh yeah, and look at that awesome sweet shot. Yeah, you might not win very much. Maybe Protoss has some sized army and is able to kill you off. And as a result, you incorrectly learn that you shouldn't push out so early, or that you shouldn't be pushing so aggressively. Look at this sort of stuff right here. Protoss coming in, if Protoss had a few more units, he'd be able to, continue just crushing this push. So what happens is the Terran starts to learn, oh yeah, I can't really push. After I kill this off, I'll probably have to turtle, so that way I can defend this expansion. And in reality, Terran should just, have done a better job earlier, and the push would easily walk into the opponent's base, and you can be really, 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 really aggressive. But again, that's such a good lesson. If any of you are feeling like there's too much to worry about, and you have to defend, and you have to do this sort of stuff where you play ultra passively, a lot of times it's an issue with your build order, not with the possibilities of your opponent, and not necessarily with the situation you've, put yourself in via build. It's just the smoothness of the build and the execution of it that's incorrectly making you feel like you have fewer possibilities than you actually do. And look at this, look how passive this is. This army can actually wander up and just kill this right away. This is doing a lot more damage than it should. And yeah, look, really nice push. And then right here, it's really easy to feel like you can't attack if you've had bad experiences with attacking in the past. And there's kind of a cute little wall here. But really, you should be demolishing this as Terran. There should be absolutely no problem at all. But look at the macro getting up into the thousands. And this shouldn't be a depressing experience to look at, for kill order. This should be like a really nice thing to look at, because everything that's going on here is definitely the right look of things. Like getting all the upgrades, the right factory counts, excellent unit composition, probably a few too many Goliaths now. Especially in the early stages, there's a very good composition of these, which means that if kill order just does exactly what he's doing, but just smooths it out a lot more, the win rate is just going to shoot through the roof, And at this stage, we don't really need to worry about anything else, because we've identified the issues with defending additional bases. And there's the good game there with the strong recall in the back. These issues with defending additional bases, these issues with worrying about too many possibilities, they all just evaporate once you start to smooth things out. So now we're going to take another replay, because we're doing 4 today, unsurprisingly. And I loved what Darkness wrote. This was actually an excellent little summary. Darkness said that the reason that I should do this replay is that he chose to practice Zerg vs. Protoss as the matchup he's practicing, and that this isn't an example of him playing stellar, of him playing horribly. It's an average replay. It's a typical example of how he plays. So already he said, okay, this is where I'm at, this isn't me trying to be impressive, this is what a normal game feels like for me. And that he says that when he looks at his games, he sees a lot of stuff he can improve in the little department, but he wants to know if there's a big picture he's missing that can really help him steam forward ahead. Look, very simple explanation, nothing too fancy, but there's still a lot of motivations for what to improve in the game and what to look at. It's not just a summary of, hey, Day, this is what happened in this game, choose him a game, cheers, Here we have a PVZ, and here we have the Darkness spawning as the Zerg pieces up here. I'll probably end up commenting a little bit about build orders, because really on this map, this funky little arena just screws things up so much, especially in rally points. Oh, Darkness playing drunk, fancy. It's nice to know that even when he's under the influence of alcohol, he's still responsible enough to pursue feedback. That's fantastic. Almost always we're going to see the early expand, unless our player wants to be nutty aggressive and do some sort of 2-gating stuff. Good scout paths. You can get away with scouting to this main early. You almost always have the opportunity to go here. I do prefer, though, to scout towards the expansion. Early expanding going on. Very late pool coming out here. It looks like we might even end up seeing an additional hatchery popping up early on. Though you can get away with this, getting this 13 pool, I'm not necessarily so sure I like that, because there are players who will 2-gate. And even though 90% of players are going to early expand, and you'll be fine regardless, you really shouldn't think about ways to be super good against that 90% of players. Instead, you should think about ways to still be able to beat that 90% who early expand, and also defeat the players who just like 2-gating on 3-player maps like Medusa. That's where you really see the players who are able to get from B to A level. The players who do know that they need to get, whoopsie daisies, who do know that they need to get this pool a little bit earlier just to account for these additional possibilities. And obviously the expansion going down. This gas feels a little bit early. It feels like this guy didn't quite pop out so early enough. So already I'm starting to feel like there's a few things that are a little bit thrown off early on. unbelievably early evolution chamber. Incredibly early evolution chamber. Absolutely critical that something is being done with this evolution chamber. This evolution chamber was never a building that was just part of a wall-off. It was part of a strategy, and in that strategy someone said, hey, maybe I can go ahead and use this as a wall-off. I'm actually going to keep my mouse hand on this evolution chamber for a long time, just to keep tabs on that. And look, very early spore colony. We're not even seeing the starport close to being done yet. I mean, that's a sort of painful mistake that we don't want to make, which is to get early defense when nothing's really coming. And the Hydral's den's out, going for the lurkers. I don't mind this really at all. Most of the time you'll see players get a Spire somewhere around here, and there's nothing wrong with just getting the Evo Chamber to deal with the Corsairs temporarily, and then going straight for the lurkers. One thing that is nice, if you do go for the Spore Colony early on to defend against Corsairs, you can upgrade early on, and I would recommend doing that, but just never get the Evolution Chamber that early, and just for some sort of one-time purpose. This Expo also wasn't really running properly early on. Some of this ordering bugs me a little bit. So I mean, we're seeing this Sunken Colony come out. So these are the questions I want to ask myself. I'm getting defense at certain times in this game. Am I getting them at the right times? Well, let's see. When this Spore Colony was finished, I went over here and the Stargate wasn't even done. Therefore, we know this guy needs to be built later. Okay, here's my Sunken Colony. Is it need to be done right now? It looks like it's pretty well timed. It looks like we have the potential for attack coming up there. So I do like that was made there. This lurker, it seems like it's coming out about at this time when we start worrying about an attack. Good timing on the lurker then. I like that. Might actually even be a little bit earlier. You should actually be cutting it a little bit close. And honestly, if you get these lurkers and you finish and they can burrow and then 2 minutes pass and the attack comes, you should say to yourself, could I have gotten away with getting these lurkers a lot later? Also, one thing to note, you can get away with taking this. You can get away with getting 4 bases pretty quickly on Medusa, because you really only have 2 chokes. You have this very super easily defendable choke, and then a slightly less easy to defend, but still relatively easy place right here. So right now, the big picture issue is just that sort of underlying mechanic stuff. Just smoothing out the build, making sure we have a strict order set down. Because this, right now, I think is too much of a focus on tactics. Hey, I can get lurkers to help me stay alive, but most importantly, I can knock down these temples and freak my opponent out. Too much of that, and you end up sort of losing the general stuff. Like, look how high our money is. This Evo Chamber that we're getting this very fast +1 carapace upgrade on. Will it continue to do stuff? Why are we getting the Spore Colony so early? Oh, we got our lair really early too. Is that ordering exactly the way we want? You should have a ordering strictly in mind. You should first label out your components of your build, like, oh, I want to get an early +1 carapace upgrade, I want to get early lurkers. But then after you've identified those components, you do need to stop and say to yourself, what is the order in which I'm going to do this stuff? Because look at this money just racking up. The main reason money racks up is not because people are just going, whoops, damn, forgot to macro, aw, shucks. It's because they don't have a strong sense of what it is that they need to be going for. Because if you have a good build set out, you'll say to yourself, okay, man, I just finished my 5th hatch. I really need to throw down that Evolution Chamber and that Hydra Dinner right away. Okay, I did that. Okay, I really need to start upgrading both of these. Actually, now I think I need that Overlord Speed upgrade too. And now I really need to start making a ton of Hydralisks. Okay, and now's about the time that I got to make Mutalisks so I can hold the stuff off. So I'm going to make Mutalisks then. And then it's not so much that you're just having good macro. It's that you're aware of all the stuff you need to get done. Coincidentally end up macroing as sort of a side effect, you know. Well, not coincidentally, it's actually completely obvious, you know, but as a direct result of you having this order in your head of what you want to do, this sort of stuff doesn't happen where your money skyrockets. And notice, these tactics are great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I want to get lurkers kind of early on. Maybe earlier than I would need for defense, because offensively, I can kill his stuff at the front, and I can threaten this temple right here. Those, I think, are fantastic arguments for it. But just always ask yourself, hey, I'm getting this stuff early on. Am I getting them too early? Could I be getting them later? So, you know, right here, seems like Protoss is doing an actually fantastic job of macroing, of transferring stuff. Doesn't look like he's very good at building probes. That's a pretty significant leak. But overall, you know, we're looking at a Protoss who is spending his money. And Zerg, you know, trying to keep the contain up. But look at this money sort of skyrocket. When you have this much money, why are we not expanding back here? We're getting a Spire now. The Spire does feel very late. No, we're not macroing out of here. We're getting a sunken colony here. Yeah, it looks like just macro is the big issue. And just planning. What do I want to do with my units? What is the goal to do with my units? And really, you can delay the Spire a little bit. You don't really need to get Scourge to hold off Corsairs. There are other alternatives. But you really do need Scourge to account for the possibility of drops. And really, you need, you know, Overlords spread out here. You'd have Scourgies patrolling there. And then just, you know, Scourgies helping out at the front with these sorts of little observer incidents. Because really there's nothing awesomer than just having this unbelievably small army of Zerg and just coincidentally continuing to kill off the observers. And look at this. Unnecessary aggression. Why are we running up here just sacrificing more units? Nothing wrong with just expanding right out here. This is an odd place to expand. Again, I think a direct result of not having a very explicit plan. An expansion here would be better. An expansion along this back wall would be better. An expansion at this natural would be better. This doesn't really serve any purpose. It's the closest spot for our opponent to kill. It's the hardest spot for us to defend. It also doesn't gain us any key ground. It actually means that if our opponent gets in the middle, that he's suddenly cut us off from this expansion. And pretty decent macro by the Protoss. Adding on more gateways. Nifty. He's continuing to upgrade. This is what's going to give this sort of player a lot of problems. When a Protoss is just good at macroing and building gateways, is being pretty relentless and focused with his plans. You know, Zerg's going to have a bunch of Hydralisks, but, you know, what good can it really do if there are not that many? So right now in this spot, it's so natural in the game, because this is when the adrenaline happens. This is when you're kind of like, oh my god, am I going to lose? Okay, I really got to focus. You know, I'm really low on units. How do I hold it off? Well, what happens in this stage, as the what was I going to say? Whoopsie daisies. Let's move that right on back up. Yeah, it's at this stage in the game when the Zerg kind of starts to panic. He's running low on units, and he's like, oh my god, I might get broken. And two things happen. One, he gets a little bit over-focused on that and forgets to do basic things like expand, do this sort of stuff. We'll see larvae sort of rack up here. And also we'll start to think, well, how do I deal with this situation now? And that moment of that huge adrenaline flood becomes the most memorable part of the game. And as a result, after the game, when you look back at it, your brain goes, okay, well, what was the most memorable part of it? Well, it was that part when I almost died. How do I not almost die? Really, the answer is, how did I even get into that situation in the first place? Not how do I deal with it once I'm in there. It's how do I have contained the Protoss so well that he couldn't have even left his front to even get in this position. Always think earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier into the game for possible solutions to the problems you're having right now. You know, if a Protoss does a big push and it doesn't work, you know, the answer isn't, should I control it better? How do I respond? Should I be trying to expand instead of attack? You know, you should think something like, could I have expanded a lot earlier? And gotten more units? Could I have gotten an upgrade a lot earlier to bolster that attack? So, you know, look at this. Expansion at the bottom gets cut off, nothing at all that he can do about it. And Zerg's starting to kind of lose it a little bit, because we don't have a fourth set up, we just have these three bases. It's a very uncomfortable spot to be in. And I'm going to go ahead and speed it up, because I think it's fairly clear that Protoss is almost certainly going to win this game. Protoss, for the most part, is relatively easy in the mid-game stages, you know, at low levels, because you don't really have that terribly many units to control, and you're really just attacking with the Dragoon Zealots and then focus on good storms. So it's a little bit tough to see clearly here, because as Zerg now, you're starting to really spend your money. You know, you've added on these extra hatcheries. Look, here's an extra 7th hatch here, the extra 6th hatch here. These don't really need to be here. You could get away without them. And I guess that's really all that I want to say on this. I mean, I'm going to speed it up just to get this out of the way. I mean, there's a big drop in the back, and this makes the game exciting to think about these sort of tactics, but really the underlying issue is that not much was done after those initial basic first set of moves. And it's important that you have that basic set down as really strong as possible. Make sure that you have a plan of what you want to be doing with your units. You always want to know, what am I doing next? And it doesn't actually take that long to have a really long, explicit game plan of exactly what you are going to do. And then once you have that, I mean, playing StarCraft becomes super mondo easy. Just, do that every game. So now we have another game coming up. Last game of the night. This is a game of Leoj, or Leoj, I guess is how I'd pronounce it. Where Leoj, again, has a very simple question. He says, I'm having problems with Zergs who make a lot of units. Oh, look. the players in the game are letting me know who I'm watching. But anyways, his question was that Leoj is the Protoss, and he says that I have issues with a Zerg who expands a lot and he gets a ton of small, cheap units. Not so much issues with the Ultralists or the Mutalisks, but with a lot of the Hydra Ling Lurk, where Protoss will push out with a big army and it will feel pretty helpless in the end. Will feel like no matter how much he sends out, he just can't quite finish his opponent off. And one thing that I would already note is that this this Zerg is in fact going for 12 pool 11 hatch. That is something where you could have 14 Nexus. You could have gotten an early Nexus before this Forge. So I think that's something to be mindful of, especially if you see that your opponent is right next to you. I'm not even reading this text. I'm just going to ignore it. But yeah, whenever you see this sort of very late spawning pool, or I should even say, anytime you see this very early Overlord that's next to you, just scout him out early immediately and double check to see if he's 12 hatch. If he's 12 hatch, you can get away with early expanding. So already I'm noticing some things like this Zerg getting a 4th hatch, not only at a time when he really can't afford it, but also really early on, like before he's even gotten his natural set up, and he's not taking a 3rd base, so this can be a little bit weird. Zergling gets in, it's one Zergling. Send 2 probes after it. And look how long those probes are sitting there. We have 3 idols right here. Right now, I'm almost certain that the answer to this is that you need to just be playing a little bit more smoothly. This wall-off is actually not tight. You should actually have the forge in the front and the gateway up like that, with the pylon and then the cannons behind. And, the Zerg correctly asking, why is the Cyber Core so late? We're going for some early Zealot harass. And look, a 5th hatch going down. Ugh, very, very ugly macro by the Zerg. And this, I think, is just a very standard example of, not very much comfort with the build you're doing. Just go play against computer, and just do the same build. Like, build up to the 6-minute mark just 20 times in a row. And try not to miss any probes. Try to get every pylon right on the money. And then just rewatch the replays of yourself playing against a computer. Protoss already held some stuff off. I mean, I'm probably going to end up going through this game pretty quickly. Again, I sincerely hope this replay isn't bugged. I doubt it is. But just again, dictating that sort of funny shit can happen. And, at this point, again, you start to feel as Protoss like, hey, I'm kind of doing the right thing. It looks like I have 6 gateways, macroing pretty well. I mean, look, I'm under 400, 200. I'm starting to macro myself up in army. These are going well. Fantastic. And even though it looks okay, there's a lot of significant bumps that happen beforehand, to the point where it actually gets kind of hard to adequately deal with all the possibilities Zerg can throw at you. And if your opponent is 2-basing his Zerg, there's absolutely no need to take a 3rd super early on. You can do it, but if you do, don't split up your Dragoons like that. That's just free units. It's being wasteful. We definitely need more Templar in this army. Getting ready to storm. I mean, and these attack locations are pretty brutal to hit. I mean, think of how powerful that storm could have been if it had come out right at the outset of the battle instead of when things were wrapping up. Because really, certainly, macro and just a smooth build order is the big issue at hand. So really, if you smooth that out, you don't have to worry about this small, big mass unit stuff. I mean, that ends up being how you lost. And this is actually a great lesson to say it this way. even though the loss was because of these small, cheap units. And a lot of times you'll have losses for a wide variety of reasons. And you shouldn't say, how do I stop that? Most of the time you should say, how do I just do what I wanted to do better? Be real stubborn. Don't think that there's any fancy, counter to this. That there's just this little, rabbit you pull out of the hat and it solves all your problems and you suddenly can never lose to a whole bunch of low-level units. Instead, what you should do is say, could I have just killed that off if I did what I did better? And a lot of times the answer is, yeah, you could totally have killed it off. Wouldn't have been an issue at all. Again, this expansion ends up being a little bit free because Protoss is not being aggressive enough. But really, I just feel like the macro is the big issue. Look at this big just disorganization of unit control. This is one of these circumstances where, the look is right. The fundamental strategy, the fact that we're getting upgrades, the fact that we're getting Templar and this sort of Dragoon Zeal combination against Zerg, those compositions are fine. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just continue to speed this up. Unit composition is fine, still keeping the money a little bit low, but the problem is that macro happens. In waves. You build a bunch of units, you get to 0, and you go, all right, awesome, and then you move out to attack, and it doesn't work, and you go, oh damn, I also have 1100. Let me just build 2 more gateways and macro a little more, and then you get down to 0, and you're like, yeah, let's go out again, and then in the big battle, it ends up not working so well. So I just want to emphasize how important it is to be stubborn in StarCraft. That's actually going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 60. But let's just think about the lessons that we learned. Just to recap them real fast. We actually won't be taking any questions because we've been going on for about an hour right now. But so before the games, we discussed how, kind of humorously, a whole lot of people just submitted descriptions of their game. Don't really try not to describe your game after you play it. Instead, think, what is it that was the big goal I had in mind, and how did that go wrong in this game? And try to identify just one thing. And there's nothing wrong with identifying the same damn thing every single time. I mean, for instance, let's say I play a game and I have bad macro, and then I look at the game and say, okay, this was my plan, and my money was too high. And then 10 games later, I, relook at the game, and I losing, and I still say, well, my money's too high, I need to spend it. There's nothing wrong with re-identifying the same mistake over and over and over again. I mean, for example, for me personally, as of late, I have a tendency to get a little bit lazy in battles because my macro is so strong that a lot of the times I'm like, I'll just kill them with stuff. I don't need to worry about it. I just have stuff, when really, at higher levels, that just doesn't cut it, So really, I should get in the habit, especially with low-level players, when I'm just starting a new account and re-laddering back up again, to really make sure I'm focusing heavily on my unit control and emphasizing that. And I'm slowly working on that. It's actually really hard for me personally to make sure I have enough focus on the battle and not to have mental laziness, to be really sharp and have 5 seconds of razor focus during the battle and continue to macro. So again, to recap that first point, make sure that you can sum up what the main problem of your game was, or a main problem, and what you're going to do to solve it. So in Plume's game, we saw some Hydra Lurk stuff, and we talked a little bit about just having good hotkey setups and setting up flanks beforehand. So that way, we don't have to worry about running out of hotkey control groups. Also making sure that we don't screw up our macro after some intense situation happens. Just making sure that we have good fundamentals after the fact. And also, if we're having trouble with weird build orders, what we should do is make sure our build is solid and then see what the timings are of everybody else's build in relation to us. That way we can kind of say, everything doesn't seem right. I guess he's up to something. So that way you can create triggers for to let you know that these sorts of weird things might be happening. In Kill Orders games, we just talked a lot about smoothing out our play, which allows us to not worry about so much stuff. Because instead of saying, oh my god, well, how do I hold off Reavers and Dark Templar and he has all this mobility, I just feel so static. Really the answer is, if my build's good enough, I'm going to kill him 90% of the time, and then how do I deal with this very narrow range of specific strategies? Suddenly it's not, I'm worried about Dark Templars and Reavers. Instead it's, well, I'm going to kill him if he gets Reavers or Dark Templar too late. How do I deal with him rushing for Dark Templar and rushing for Reavers? If he does anything else that's not a rush, cool. Now we have very clear-cut problems. We know how to study and how to deal with them. In Darkness's game, again, he was talking about practicing one matchup, and it's sort of a typical game, and I think it was a great example of how important it is to have a good plan of what you want to do at all stages in the game. You want to think about how to, or what you always want to be doing next, and that a lot of times can really help you keep your money low. And also adjusting the order that you're doing things, because we saw that maybe some lurkers were too early, maybe that spore colony was a little bit too early, maybe those hatches in the expanding was a little bit too late. Just shifting stuff around in order to sort of maximize our effectiveness. And then, of course, we sort of wrap things up with Leo J, who, again, has the totally right look of things, but just by not having a smooth enough build order, it can feel a little confusing how to improve, because you spend too much time saying, how do I stop what that guy did? When really the answer is, can I just do what I'm doing normally, but do it better? And then I won't have to worry about this stuff. That's why I think the best lesson to learn, just to be very stubborn and just to focus on smoothing stuff out. Therefore, we are going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 60. Episode 61 is going to be coming up tomorrow, and it will be yet another set of replay analyses of your submissions, and I already have them selected, so we eagerly await their arrival tomorrow. So that's going to wrap things up. Thanks so much, everyone, and cheers.